Hey y'all, enjoying the weather today. It's finally cold, feels great outside. Um, but apart from that, I just want to say today I want to talk about the challenges of leadership that results in the choice of the leader themselves and how they want to go about really structuring their ministry, their calling, their operation, right? But before I get into that, just a few quick announcements. If you want to connect with me and see what other courses or products or things like that I have, go to my website, caveofmystery.org. There you'll be able to find everything. Coming up in May, I'm doing a School of the Prophets. It's a one-day event for prophets and prophetic people to kind of hone their craft and really understand their calling a bit more. So if that's something you're interested in, you can sign up on the website, caveofmystery.org, along with everything else, right? So let's talk about quality and quantity, right? These are usually presented as uh, feuding ideas or ideals. And that's more so the fault of the presentation of the people, where in an ideal world it's possible to have both. So what do I mean by quality and quantity as it pertains to the operation of a ministry or work and the decision of a leader? Well, people are different, meaning that depending on what you're called to do, right? Let's just say you're like me and you're called, and one of the things that you do is operate in the supernatural, focus on the deeper mysteries, the deeper truths, deeper levels of responsibility, right? In that, you have two options. You can either cater your messages to the people who are likely going to misunderstand you, or you can focus in on the people who either are willing to understand and grow or already understand you. And while on the surface it seems like, oh, it doesn't matter, just tell the truth. No, that comes from someone who's either functioning in a shallow place or functioning in a place that really doesn't understand how leadership and communities really work. Because every leader understands what I'm talking about, because really I've talked to so many of them, and it's something that they struggle with. It's a certain deal of fear where a lot of them know what they're called to do, but are afraid of how the masses will respond. So there's a certain deal of the fear of man that creeps into their calling. In addition to that, you have, let's see. Yeah. So in addition to that, you have, okay. Yeah. So in addition to that, you have, well, the flip side. It's, well, how about I cater my ministry and I cater my operation to new people? So you'll either cater, and this is a decision people either make consciously or unconsciously. Either you're going to cater to the masses or you're going to cater to the remnant, and you can't do both. Why is that? Because they scare each other off. There's a sacrifice that needs to be made in that regard. Either you're going to focus on how many people you can attract, or you're going to focus on the level of growth that you're able to bring about in individuals. You can't really do both at the same time. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people want that. And it's also that idea that keeps so many leaders in a state of paralysis. So, this is what ends up happening. You have a leader who's functioning in the spirit, they know their calling, and a part of them wants as many people as possible to hear the message that they know God put on their heart and experience the things that God has called them to function in. That's part of them. The other part of them doesn't want to be responsible for running someone away, scaring someone off, or being the reason that someone leaves God because they saw something that they didn't understand. So I'm not even saying that this usually comes out of a place of malice, just that it comes out of a place at all. It happens. So there becomes a compromise. There that creates a compromise. So instead of teaching the deeper things that they know that they could, they start to focus on what's probably the safest for the new people that are going to start showing up. And then it's around this part, you notice that ministries will start to boom in numbers. But the people who were there in the beginning, they have this idea, they have this history about it, where it makes them reminisce on the good old days, the days when there weren't as many people, but the level of spiritual growth was magnificent. So in catering to the masses, you fail to supply and really grow your remnant. And again, you can't do both at the same time. Because if you start to care about the masses, you end up building a prison around yourself. You surrounded yourself with an audience that doesn't understand you and are made for a level that's actually fake as it pertains to your authentic self. Now, if you start to deal with your remnant, you start to deal with those who are spiritual, those who are spirit filled, those who are spirit led, and those who are really ready to go beyond, it's not going to be many people. Most people aren't spiritual. Most people aren't at all, which means you're going to run most people off because, well, for spiritual people, the idea of praying, the idea of sitting in the face of God, sitting in the presence of God, hearing the voice of God, for spiritual people, that's standard. That's not standard for the masses. So you're going to run the masses off because you're starting to expect from them something that they don't live by. This is why you'll notice, and this is something I noticed even back when I was a Christian, Sunday service is packed. Prayer meeting, it's only 6 of us. And in a way, that's a good paradigm to use for what I'm talking about here today, is that you'll either cater to the masses that come for Sunday service, or you'll focus on the remnant who show up for a prayer meeting. The people who would show up for the prayer meeting kind of fit the archetype of the people who are really after the Spirit, who actually want to connect with God. And I'm not going to tell you which one to pick, more so that one needs to be picked. So if you are a leader and you're making the decision to cater to the masses, let your remnant know, hey, I know we connected over these deeper things, but I'm not going to be there for a long time. If you, I release you to go somewhere else and find a place that'll actually continue your growth, because I'm going to stay at this level and usher people in at this shallow level. This isn't going to feed you, and I don't want to take up your time when you could be learning from somewhere else. As a responsible leader, that's the best way to handle that if you're making that decision. Leaders aren't going to say that, though. Now, in the case of catering to your remnant, those who are truly after the Spirit, it changes the way you go about marketing. Instead of come back next time, bring a friend, bring someone with you, it's not about that. It's be a consistent staple in your region. Be consistent and invite those who are willing to show up. It's going to be a few. It's going to be a few, but treat that few like gold. Treat them as you would a celebrity, because those are the people who are actually after the Spirit. That is your kingdom people. That's a people that can get work done in the world, that can actually begin to grow, which means all your focus goes towards them and the advancement of that small community. So it's not about, hey, invite a friend, invite this person, that person. Come on, let's bring more people. Let's do a conference. Let's attract some people. It doesn't work that way when you're dealing with a remnant, because most of them are likely going to be uninterested in that stuff. And here's the reason. Here's the other thing. When things get too spiritual, you scare away the shallow. The type of creatures that you'll find in shallow waters are not the same type of creatures you find in the deep. And that's the same with us in our spirituality. There's a depth to this thing that separates us. There's a density that separates us. So if you decide to cater to your remnant, be okay with the numbers starting to dwindle. That's going to happen. And the reason why that's scary for so many leaders is that, especially in America, I can't speak for the other countries, but especially in America, we were taught to measure our success by the amount of people that we have coming in and out of our ministry, how many people show up for our fellowship, how many people come to the conferences, how much money we're able to raise. Which means if you start to deal with a remnant, all the leaders know that the numbers are going to drop, the money's going to drop, the popularity is going to drop. It's not a popular job to work with a remnant. It's not. And that's a subtle fear. It's also a certain level of insecurity where you have the idea in the back of your mind of, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me. This God, and people struggle internally where it comes to that, where they're like, well, I know I'm focusing on the spirit, but people aren't showing up. What's going on? Maybe I need to do something a little different. Maybe I need to change the marketing tactics. And that's usually where the issues start to set in. It's at that moment many leaders sacrifice their remnant because they don't want to look shallow. They don't want to look weak to the rest of the community. So they sacrifice their remnant. And in turn, they sacrifice themselves, because leaders are a product of the audience that they entertain regularly. See, when you're used to dealing with a remnant, you talk a certain way. When you start to deal with the masses, it actually puts a certain deal of fear of man in you, where you're constantly afraid of being misunderstood. When you deal with a remnant, we know that we're not going to understand everything in the moment, but there's grace and space for learning and catching up. The masses isn't really an educational forum. It's a community service project at its best, meaning this is what I'm doing for those who aren't as deep. Again, leaders, you have to make a decision, because this is what's stopping this revival that so many of you say you want, is that many of you sacrificed your remnant for the masses. Not saying that's a good or a bad thing, just saying that it's a thing, and that's why. See, those deeper things in the spirit require a deeper level of spirituality. If we use a paradigm of some of the greats that we respect from old, like William Seymour and the Azusa Street Revival, you understand that William Seymour didn't just decide to go to California and start a church. That's not what happened. He ended up starting a prayer meeting, which became a global phenomenon. But it was just a prayer meeting. They had decided to meet and pray, and that was it. They were going to pray in tongues. They were going to engage the spirit, and whatever happened, happened. When you have the masses in mind, you're not thinking about, oh, I'm providing a space for the spirit to flow. Whatever happens, happens. What you're thinking about is, I wonder if this is going to scare people. I wonder if people are going to come back. I wonder if they understand what's going on. So a lot of leaders end up playing goalie. They end up refereeing a move of God because they don't want to scare people away. You got to let people be scared and come back later when they grow up, if they grow up. You're not harming people by giving them a real encounter with God. If they're not ready for God, they're not ready for God. There's nothing you can do about it. What'll end up happening is, if you choose to play the referee role, you'll end up coddling people instead of raising people up. And that's for the apostolic community. Apostles aren't meant to coddle. Meant to change, be agents of change, bringing the record of heaven into the earth. That's a startling process. That's not fun. That's not easy, nor is it a daycare. Your job isn't to protect people from experiencing heaven on earth. You're meant to bring people into a heaven on earth experience. Let's talk about another scenario, another prayer meeting. There was a group of women known as the Ladies of the Golden Candlestick, or the Ladies of Gold, who, like I said, they would just meet and pray. And the room would shift to such a degree. It was a small group of women. Like I said, prayer meetings are usually small. It was a small group of women. Few times some of their husbands would come, but mostly women. And they would pray, and eventually the atmosphere shifted in such a way that portals would begin to open up where they could physically walk into and out of heaven. Their clothes would change into garments of heaven, where they would wear clothes and shoes that were actually sculpted and woven out of actual gold. They would have these dense glory clouds that would sweep through the room, these purple clouds, all types of things like that. Why don't we see this more? The masses are afraid of God. See, what we're being prompted for, and I'll tell you what a lot of leaders are hearing and are somewhat paralyzed by. We're being prompted for a mass revival in the United States. We are, but it's not a result of anything happening in the world. It's something that God is pressing on the hearts of its leaders, but the leaders don't want to make that decision because it sacrifices the masses. If people started to focus on actually catering to the presence of God and fostering a move of the Spirit regularly, not just a move of the leader's anointing, because that can happen. That's actually a ministry secret that if you have the anointing and you know how to move in power, you can move in power when you feel like it. They don't want you to know that, but it's true. It's not just God moves on them and then all of a sudden they can do it. No, it's a decision they make. So it's not just a move of the leader's anointing. I'm talking about an actual presence that does all the work. This is something uh, that can be harnessed. That is something that can be cultivated. It just isn't done with masses. Again, done with a remnant. Now, is it possible to have both quality and quantity? Technically, yes, but it's a slow process, meaning that you start with the remnant and the remnant is what's growing. You can't really mix the shallow and the deep. That doesn't work. That's not going to work. People in the shallow parts might take a few steps closer. They might go a little deeper, but that's about it. This move of God that so many of you want, I'll tell you, we've known the formula for revival for centuries. It's really just prayer and cultivating a presence and maintaining that presence. It's not hard. The issue is the masses don't like it. It's going to be misunderstood. You're going to be attacked. You're going to lose friends. You're going to be ridiculed. And it's that part of the process that a lot of leaders don't like. They want to be friends with everybody. They want to maintain all their relationships. They don't want to fall out over something like that. They are keeping the peace in a lot of regards. And that comes at the expense of their spiritual access. That comes at an expense of the experience that they're able to not just have themselves, but what they're able to host in an arena, host in a space. William Seymour would sit in the corner with a box over his head and he'd pray in tongues until the Spirit told him to do something else. And then he'd stop and do that and then go back into praying in his box. The miracle signs and wonders didn't stop in Azusa until William Seymour stopped praying in that box. We've had that formula for 100 years. How many of you have ever prayed inside of a box in tongues until the Spirit told you to do something else? No one, right? It looks crazy. That might scare someone away. You have to make a decision. Again, this is for leaders. You have to make a decision. Are you going to go into the deeper things of the Spirit? Or are you going to stay stagnant and pretty much sacrifice the growth of your community? It's your decision to make. But yeah, like if you want both quality and quantity at the same time, focus on the remnant and let the remnant grow. It's going to take a while, because that's eventually what happened with Azusa, is that it started off small as just prayer. And as those high level miracle signs and wonders started to happen, more and more people would come, and more and more people would come, and more and more people would come, till eventually it was a global phenomenon. But even with all the miracle signs and wonders, they still suffered ridicule from other leaders. In fact, his mentor was one of his main attackers. Charles Fox Parham was a racist guy. He didn't like the idea that the spirit was using a black man that well, so he wanted to shut that move of God down. In his head, God doesn't use Negroes. This is wrong, which is even how he ended up in California in the first place. It was supposed to be the city of Houston. It ended up being one building in California. Yikes. That's a whole nother story. So if you're going to focus on the remnant and you're going to focus on quality over quantity, focus on quality. Build your remnant. Press into the deeper things. Don't expect many to show up, and don't beat them up for not showing up. Don't do that. Recognize that most people are not ready for the deeper levels, and there's nothing you can do to speed that up. You can't shift the masses from shallow to deep. It doesn't happen that way. Individuals can choose to go into the deeper on their own, but as far as masses, it's not going to happen. Let's see. I think that's all I had to share with y'all today. Quality, quantity. Eventually, it reaches that place again, but that doesn't void you of having to deal with ridicule and backbiting and slander and libel. It doesn't stop any of that stuff. That's going to happen regardless. It's going to happen from people that you love and you respect. That's part of it. Is that, will you let something as simple as someone you like stop you from pursuing the deeper things of the spirit? Find out just how powerful the fear of man is. So that's all I got for y'all today. Those of you that are in Beaumont, I'm going to be down there Friday. We're doing a small meeting. If you're interested, message me on Facebook. And I'll let you know where the event will be. But that's Beaumont, Friday, 6 p.m. Have a few other speaking engagements. All of that, all the other stuff, check my website, caveofmystery.org. Again, School of the Prophets. For those of you who are either prophets or prophetic people, and you want to learn how to really step into your calling, you want to learn the mechanics of how to do what needs to be done, and all the things that comes with that vein of spirituality, caveofmystery.org. But that's it. Y'all be blessed. Until next time, see y'all later.